And today we're on chapter 16. We're starting a new chapter on Swami Akhandananda, and it's about Swamiji. It's on Swamiji with his relationship to Swami Akhandananda. Okay. Swami Akhandananda obeyed to the letter the command of Swamiji. Devote yourself entirely in body, mind, and speech to the good of the world. He gave himself completely to the task of giving tangible shape to this grand ideal for the age, the service of God in man. Then came a stunning blow, the news that Swamiji, dearer to him than life itself, had left his body. On receiving this painful news, he hastened to the mutt with a heavy heart. For some time, Swamiji had been in fairly good health, and gradually merged into a deep meditation. At 9 p.m., the attendant heard suddenly the almost inaudible words, "Mother, oh mother." He entered the room and found the eternal mother's child, as if asleep in her arms. One cannot imagine how the monks of the Bellarmont passed that night. They had all known that Swamiji would not be with them for long, but they were not prepared for such a sudden departure. Swami Brahmananda and Swami Premananda came forward to infuse their hearts with strength and confidence. The leadership now, just one second, I turned my page too fast. The leadership now devolved upon Swami Brahmananda, while Swami Premananda and his brothers stood by him. Swamiji had already recalled Swami Sardananda from America to take on the position of secretary of the Ramakrishna mission. At the news of Swamiji's final departure, sannyasins and devotees from all over India gathered at the Bellarmont to find solace for their grief. Swami Akhandananda arrived at the mott barefoot and was completely indifferent to everything around him. Without meeting or speaking to anyone, he went straight to Swamiji's room. There he sat in deep meditation. Swami Premananda entered the room and held his dear brother in a close embrace while the two wept. Still, Swami Akhandananda remained in the same indifferent and absent-minded mood. Sometimes he would be found on the bank of the Ganga, and at other times in Swamiji's room. Swamiji's room awakened in him a sense of his own emptiness. He mused, "Is Swamiji really gone? When the master cast off his body, I thought there was nothing in life left for me. Should I go back to the Himalayas? It was at Swamiji's call that I left the Himalayas. Now that Swamiji himself is gone, why remain here any longer? The purpose of this life is at an end." One morning, Swami Akhandananda went in this state of mind to Kalighat to visit one of Swamiji's much-loved disciples, Sharat Chandra Chakravarti. His object in going there was to hear him talk of Swamiji's last days and thus ease the burden of his heart. On his way back, he stood on the tramway tracks thinking, "Why should I live? I may as well end my life here." The tramcar was still at a distance when he saw before him a glorious form, ochre-robed and with a smiling face. He heard Swamiji say, "Am I dead?" This sudden appearance of Swamiji in these words, just 7 days after his departure, filled Swami Akhandananda's heart with great joy. Still he did not move, even at the constant ringing of the tramcar bell. Observing his attitude, the conductor got down from the tram and shook him by the hand, asking, "Have you gone mad?" The Swami now came back to his senses and was able to continue on his way. He went to see Sister Nivedita at Chirangi. The Swami told her of the vision he had had of Swamiji. Sister Nivedita recounted her one blessed vision. She had wept a great deal that day after attending the funeral, and Swamiji had appeared to her in his eternal beatific form, so she could speak about him cheerfully now. During this visit, Swami Akhandananda heard from her many things about the last days of Swamiji. In Swami Akhandananda's eyes, Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda were not two separate beings. The same great power, sometimes appearing as Ramakrishna and sometimes as Swami Vivekananda, had always given him vision and inspiration. Swamiji's influence on his life was deep and far-reaching. Only those who heard him can know how charming and touching were his talks on Swamiji. Once he related the following incident. One night at Belur, long before daybreak, I woke up with a desire to see Swamiji. I knocked at his door softly. I didn't want to wake him if he were asleep, but Swamiji was awake, and the reply came by way of a melody. Knocking, knocking, who is there? Waiting, waiting, brother dear. Referring to this period with Swamiji, Swami Akhandananda said, when Swamiji put emphasis on an idea, it seemed then that it was the truth, the only truth. This was often the case. None could read his mind easily. When the topic was about service, it appeared that selfless action was the only path. When, on another day, the topic was study and meditation, it seemed as if the path of knowledge and meditation was the best path. On such a day, he would appear to be Shankara or Buddha. When speaking of Radharani, of the gopis and their love for Krishna, he was an altogether different person. He would say, Radha was not flesh and blood. She was the froth on the ocean of love. How often we heard him say that. He would mutter the words to himself and pace up and down. On the other hand, if anyone talked about Radha and Krishna or the love of the gopis, he would often stop the person and say, read Shankara. Fill yourself with the idea of Shiva. Little contradictory. Maybe. Further elucidating Swamiji's great message, Swami Akhandananda said, renunciation and service are the noblest forms of religious expression. Service to all as one's own self, without a shade of selfishness. This is the true karma yoga. This is the path of service. In the means is the end. Service purifies the mind, expands the heart, and thus helps one to see the self in all beings. From realization of the self comes universal love, and with the knowledge of that, from Brahman down to the tiniest insect, in every created being, there is that God of love. Service to the created jiva, individual soul, is service to Shiva, the supreme soul. In truth, there is nothing created, it is all Shiva. In the present age, Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji were the visible gods. It is easier to see Swamiji, for he is ever ready to show himself. But it is not so easy to see Sri Ramakrishna. Men of this age will come to know him through Swamiji. That is the reason you see people are attracted first to Swamiji's ideas so enthusiastically. Through service to the sick and needy, relief to the famine-stricken and the victims of natural calamities and epidemics, as well as through love of country. Through all these, the ground is being prepared. But the hearts are being purified for future spiritual development. The service of God and man has only begun. The awakening of divine love is still far off. Every word of Swami Akhandananda conveyed his deep understanding of Swamiji's message. Swamiji was, in truth, an embodiment of spiritual ideals. He was not, so to speak, a man of flesh and blood. He was the ideal itself made manifest. Speaking of service to India, Swami Akhandananda would exclaim, Swamiji's love for his country is not easily understood. It is not patriotism as the Westerners understand it. It is being conscious of one's country as a spiritual entity, as one's own self. People in general are conscious only of their physical weal and woe, engrossed as they are in the body. But here, it is the identity of the country with one's own self, feeling and thinking for the whole country in its entirety, of its past, present, and future. Swamiji would lose himself altogether, as it were, when talking about the miserable state of the country. In reply to my question, why doesn't the country wake up, brother? His answer would be, brother, it is a fallen race. The characteristic signs indicate this. Of Swamiji's all-embracing love, Swami Akhandananda would say, in his last days, Swamiji had cut off almost all association with people. He had a small menagerie in the Mott consisting of a few Chinese geese, swans, ducks, cranes, various pigeons, as well as dogs, cats, and sheep. He used to feed and pet them and watch over them with much affection. You may draw a parallel of such scenes from Krishna's playful days as a cowherd boy among the cattle. It is not possible for me to describe the changes in Swamiji's expression on those occasions. That is what is meant by universal love for all forms of life. When speaking of Swamiji, Swami Akhandananda would become transformed. An indescribable, serene light would glow on his face. However, the great Swami's passing away affected him deeply. He felt a great void in his heart and lost all his enthusiasm for work. Again and again his mind would dwell on memories of his beloved brother-disciple. Then, early one morning, in a dream, he saw Swamiji walking along a street in Burhanpur going toward the Ganga. I saw Swamiji as an extraordinarily stout and strong Mussulman fakir, with an iron chain around his waist and wearing a loose robe. He carried an iron rod capped with an iron knob from which small chains hung. He came singing, jingling the chains on the rod to keep time. He had 4 disciples with him. I asked him, why in this form? He replied, unless I have such a body, how can I work? In your Bengal, they have delicate frames that knuckle under with the slightest austerity. Do you know I don't sit idle? I'm spreading amongst these people the all-embracing ideas of our master. So it is that I'm moving among them as a fakir. I then asked, who are these? Pointing to each of the 4 in turn, he said, Iran, Turan, Khorasan, Afghan. What will you do with them? Only with such frames can one assimilate the Vedanta, was the reply. Again, I asked, what are you going to do now? He replied, that they unite with Hindustan is what I am about. Go through the Vedas and the Mahabharata, and you will find these are your kinsmen, but a counter force is always opposing. The dream left a deep impression on Swami Akhandananda. Concerning it, he said, this time there will be a new awakening in Turkey, Persia, Afghanistan, and other states. The time is fast drawing near when the whole of Asia will attain freedom. For some days more, Swami Akhandananda lived at the mat with his brothers before returning to his ashram. Swami Subodhananda gave him some of Swamiji's pet animals, but they did not live long. He also took Swamiji's tampura as a holy memento. Okay, are there any questions or comments about any of this?
What's a tampura?
Tampura is a stringed instrument, John, that gives a drone in the background of Indian music. It's just a drone.
Thank you.
Okay? Okay. Then we are going on to chapter 17, the ashram in progress. So now he's returned to his ashram. On returning to the ashram, Swami Akhandananda found that Chobiji, his most devoted worker and his right hand, as it were, was seriously ill. For 6 years he had served the residents of the ashram with loving care and devotion, but now he was confined to bed. A good physician was called in, and arrangements were made for his nursing. Brahmachari Gyan Maharaj, a disciple of Swamiji, was in the ashram at the time and assisted the Swami in his work. As no suitable cook was available, Swami Akhandananda himself took over the responsibility. Also, he had to look after everything else in the ashram. Despite being constantly engaged from morning till late at night, day in and day out, he never seemed to feel tired, and he was perfectly at ease. In the free lower primary school, 3 boys passed with distinction in 1902, one of them receiving a government scholarship. The school was then raised to the upper primary standard, with 3 teachers on the staff. The annual grant from the government was increased, as well as the number of students. Because of its growth, a larger building was required. The unlettered villagers also began to take an interest in education. A night school was started for them for 3 hours each evening. In the noon hours, there were classes for the boys from the ashram and of the village in the industrial section of the school. It was compulsory for every student to take part in games and physical exercise for half an hour each afternoon. Popular country games were played, in which Swami Akhandananda took part sometimes. At other times, he acted as umpire. In the nearby village of Mahula, there were a number of people well skilled in the use of the lati, a long stick, as a weapon of offense and defense. An expert among them was engaged to train the village youth and the ashram boys in this art. Besides this, jumping, wrestling, and other forms of physical culture were taught, which received the encouragement of the Raja of Lalgola, as well as the local British merchants. To foster the spirit of manliness which Swamiji so earnestly desired, Swami Akhandananda organized the Vivekananda Samiti, founded on 12 July 1903. Its primary aim was physical education. At this time, the condition of Brahmachari Chobiji deteriorated rapidly. His case was diagnosed as tuberculosis. He died towards the end of the year 1903, leaving many to mourn for him, owing to his years of selfless work. In the company of Swami Akhandananda, a great and wonderful change had come over this orthodox, illiterate Hindustani Brahmin. In 1904, the weaving department of the ashram was supplied with an expert teacher, and the carpentry department with 2 trained carpenters, one of whom was an expert from Calcutta. At that time, the total number of students was 33, the carpentry section having 20 trainees. From 1903, Maharaj Manindra Chandra Nandi opened an annual agricultural and industrial exhibition at his estate at Banjitia, 4 miles from Burhanpur. The young members of the managing committee spent over a month there preparing for the exhibition. Swami Akhandananda often stayed with them to encourage them. In the evenings, he would narrate to them interesting anecdotes and stories of Swamiji's life, as well as reminiscences on his own travels and experiences. A large stall was allotted for wooden furniture and cloth produced in the ashram orphanage. The boys won first prize, and at the same time were able to sell most of their exhibited articles. Their good workmanship doubly benefited the ashram, for the crafts not only began to be in demand, but also helped to publicize the ashram's activities to many people. However, along with the success and the progress of the ashram, there were difficulties, for some of the citizens of the area were unkind critics. Government officials and European merchants were very helpful to the institution at this time. Swami Akhandananda once said appreciatively, "It is the Europeans who are the prop of the ashram. When a violent storm was blowing over me, and certain people in the village were bent on throwing me out, Mr. Koch spoke favorably of me at the Burhanpur Grant Hall. They would say to me, 'Don't worry, Swamiji, we are with you. Never yield to them.'" Banabihari Sen, an influential zemindar of Burhanpur, put before the detractors true information about the ashram, its noble aim and disinterested work, which turned many an enemy into a well-wisher. The industrial section of the school was soon full of life and activity. With the untiring efforts of its head and monetary aid from the Maharaja of Kazim Bazar, as well as support from countrymen and foreign patrons, the secluded institution was kept busy throughout the day. When schoolwork was over at noon, the weaving looms began to operate. The sound of sewing machines would be heard in one place and of carpenter's tools in another. Yet other students were occupied with sericulture. At dusk came the time for prayers, followed by night school for adults. This is really a busy schedule each day. After the passing away of Swami Vivekananda, Swami Akhandananda kept himself occupied continually. One evening late in 1904, after the day's work was done, he was reminiscing about his travels in the Himalayas and the solace he had found there after Sri Ramakrishna had left the world. And he remembered that Swamiji had told him, when the Bengali periodical Udbodhan was started, "Ganga," that was his name, "Ganga, write about your travels in Tibet. People will profit much from them." So every night after the day's work, the Swami set himself to write an account of his travels in the Himalayas. This was contributed to the Udbodhan every month in serial form, under the caption, 3 Years in Tibet. The response of its readers was enthusiastic. M., the recorder of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, asked Swami Akhandananda to give further details of the incidences. The Swami had taken no notes, nor had he any idea of writing a book. 15 years had now elapsed, and he had only his memory to depend upon. The reason for writing of his travels is given in his own words. "After so long a time without even the aid of any materials, I make bold to put my hand to this task, that the majestic form of the Himalayas, which at one time so completely possessed my heart, might ever remain alive in me. If even the whole universe is immersed in the fathomless sea of oblivion, The Himalayas will for all time flash before my eyes. Okay, we'll read just a little more. There was a time when, perforce, he had to stop writing for want of a cook, even though he received express calls for his contribution from the editor. This is what he said at that time. There's no cook in the ashram. I had to cook morning and evening. I served the food, washed the utensils, and then after finishing all the work, sat up the whole night writing. My writing was being published month by month, serially. The lantern kept burning from 9 at night till dawn next day. I would still keep on writing, for fear of missing an idea that might not come again. The master was, as it were, prompting me. In the chill of early dawn, my pen stopped. The feeling became so intense that I imagined I saw the white, icy cold mountainside of some Himalayan scene before me. It was then, as it were, back in the perfect solitude and silence of the Himalayas. Thus I spent 9 sleepless days and nights. On the 9th night, while I was writing, with feeling too, the letters began to run together and became jumbled up. I could proceed no more and lay down. Oh, what a sleep I slept that day. I have never had the same again in my life. In describing the famous Shiva shrine at Kedarnath, Swami Akhandananda lost himself so completely that he could write no more. Often the desire to complete the remaining portion arose, but incessant work in the ashram would not permit him. And we will stop there for this afternoon. Any questions or comments about his description of his selfless service and dedication, or anything else that you want to comment on? Okay. As I say, we will cancel the gospel reading Saturday at 5 this week. Professor Wade Daisy will speak on Sunday at 11 o'clock on spiritual procrastination. Then Monday, the 26th, we will have Swami Vivekananda speaking at 5 in the temple before Vespers. I'm not sure what his topic is yet, but he'll be speaking here, followed by a potluck after Vespers. So you're all invited, of course, those of you that are living in this area. Those of you that aren't, I'm sure will have his talk on Zoom and YouTube. Okay?
Will Deborah's vows be on Zoom or YouTube?
No. Absolutely not, John. Did you hear that laugh that came out of her? No, they will not be on Zoom or YouTube. But if you look at the Vedanta Society website, you will see that the visiting swamis and nuns will be giving talks on, Saturday morning, starting at 10:30, and they'll probably come from the Hollywood Temple. And each one, there are 4 visiting swamis and 4 visiting nuns, so there'll be 2 nuns speaking on Saturday morning and 4 swamis. I think so. Those will be on Swami Vivekananda because it's in celebration of 125 years since he lived in Pasadena at Swamiji House. On Sunday morning, the talks will be given in Trabuco Monastery. I'm not sure whether they will be on Zoom, but they'll be available on YouTube later. I'm not sure how their Zoom works down there.
They usually upload it later.
Okay, Durga was telling me they usually upload later, afterwards, but they will also be available. And at a little later. So any questions about the weekends in events? Even I'm confused about what's happening each day. Hard to keep track of.
Now that you have Vedanta Square down there where the temple is, you ought to get them to rename the Rose Bowl the Lotus Bowl.
We should, shouldn't we? Oh, and the reason we're doing Trabuco is because this is the 75th year of the founding of the monastery at Trabuco. So we'll probably be celebrating all year with visiting swamis and visiting, I think we're celebrating all year everything. But keep in touch. Get on the mailing list. Okay. Monday here in Santa Barbara, Swami Vivekananda from Sacramento at 5 o'clock, followed by a potluck after Vespers. Okay? And we'll see you. Everyone stay well and keep healthy. We'll see you then. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Good to see all of you, and even the ones here in the temple.